Hi, I am Tony Russo, and this is In Case You Missed It from Kates-Boylston for the week ending Friday, February 28th, 2025. This episode is sponsored by Passages International. Looking for a way to honor your loved one while honoring the planet? Passages specializes in eco-friendly funeral products made from renewable, biodegradable materials. Whether it's a stunning willow casket, a biodegradable urn for scattering, or their unique memorial keepsakes, Passages helps create meaningful goodbyes that tread lightly on the earth. Join the movement toward greater funerals. Visit passagesinternational.com and discover how you can celebrate a life while protecting the planet for generations to come. Link in the show notes. There are two things I really love about reporting on Carriage when it does its earnings for the quarter. The first is it's always a fun, there's always a lot of meat to dig into because they're just a company kind of in transition, and as they come out of the transition, there's always something fun to report on. But of course, the second best part for me is that they kind of herald the end of earnings season. So they're usually the last of the big three public funeral home companies to report. And this week's report I've covered in Funeral Service Insider, and subscribers have already gotten their the story that I've written on it. But what I wanted to bring out about the earnings report, which you can find the numbers, they did fine on their earnings, but at the end of the earnings report, they always take calls from analysts, and that's really where the stories are. And one of the things that they had the opportunity to explain to analysts, which is something that we talk about all the time, so it's weird for me to be the one who's like, oh, I know the answer to this. One of the analysts was confused because part of the cremation revenue went up, even though cremation itself didn't go up as much. And they were saying, how do you make money? How are you able to make so much more money even as cremation, rises? And Carlos Quesada, which he's said several times in Funeral Service Insider, is like, well, we are crazy focused on the memorialization, and to see it start to pay off for smaller companies, I think can be, an endorsement, I guess, of the project. Again, Carriage is a large-ish company, especially compared to the independent, and small groups that kind of make up our readership and our listenership. But they have done two things over the last 2 years that they've hit upon in every quarter, and I keep reporting on it. So I don't know, maybe they'll ask me to do the next earnings call. But the two things that they've been really good at doing is they've focused almost exclusively on reducing their debt. And, that's paying for sins of the past, but they're paying them. They're not trying to get around that in any way. They're just using an insane amount of financial discipline, and then they're doubling down on making sure that they really make everything possible to families who come to them for cremation. And what they're finding is it really does work. Like making the effort to take every family all the way through all of the different things that can be done with cremated remains has helped drive revenue. And now, as this comes out, tomorrow will be that feature story that I've been teasing from American Cemetery about, selling cremation slots in cemeteries, and how SCI has really kind of reimagined their cemetery revenue by doing this very same thing. So this isn't just something that people say at conferences. This isn't just a talking point. This is something that has produced a significant amount of growth in at least two, as I've reported in the last 2 weeks, of the largest funeral home companies on the planet. Like, they are changing the amount of revenue they can generate by training their people and focusing them on improving memorialization sales. And if it's not something that you're doing, it's certainly something that you should consider, only because it also makes families more receptive to it. And the idea, I think, in another 15 years of just, having direct cremation is gonna fade, because there is not just more money to be made in taking cremation families more seriously, but there's more good to be done. Like, people are going to be more satisfied with the funerals that they're having, and they're going to feel like they're getting their money's worth for the grief relief that this new, or this increasingly popular, I guess, approach has taken. So, a link to the story in the show notes. The Carriage earnings themselves were just fine, and there's not a lot to talk about. But I do talk in the story a little bit about their other programs, and they're looking to have a big 2026. What I really got a kick out of is they did their forecast for the year with the assumption that they wouldn't be buying any funeral homes. And they call it organic versus inorganic growth. And I thought that was really kind of a cagey thing. They've said that they're going to be very careful, and I believe them. But earlier this year, or late last year, I reported that, Service Corporation International was hedging their numbers because they want to be aggressive, but they don't want to build aggressive buying into their budget. And now to see Carriage do the same thing, that just makes me feel like they're also trying to maybe make sure that prices don't go spinning out of control. With a lot of people saying, oh, if this is the year of consolidation, then this is the year I'm going to really get every nickel that I can for my funeral home if I'm retiring. But I wonder, by not committing to buying a ton of things, but just planning to buy a ton of things, I wonder if that's a way to kind of keep expectations about both prices and growth low. Because if you don't have to make a deal, as some people have in the past, then you can wait and make better choices. And I think we're going to see that. I think we have a succession. I guess I should have done this commercial up front, but we have a succession roundtable planned for next week. It's a private thing that I'm going to be filming with some industry experts, and then we'll be putting it out later on, I think in April. But I feel like this is going to be a central part. If you are working with a succession planner, or if you're considering working with a succession planner, this idea that, there's kind of a rush to do deals, and maybe not being part of that initial rush can help get you a little bit more money for your funeral home down the line, if you have all your other ducks in a row that we always talk about. If you are rightly valued, and if you have the right expectations, and if you have the costs in place so that they're real and that you know what they are. I think this is a good time for funeral directors who are looking to sell and to retire. It might be a good time. It might be a better time than you think. But again, we'll be reporting on that for the rest of the year for sure. But as far as the bones of Carriage's report, there's a link to my reporting in the show notes, and I'll also put a link to the to regular reporting that's not necessarily behind a paywall, if you just want to see the number rundowns without my brilliant analysis. Link in the show notes. Although this is technically about Carriage, it's also a separate story, which is why I am reporting on it kind of separately. When I shared the initial Carriage story to my LinkedIn page, where I get all of the stories for this, I shared one that had been written by AI, and I would love for you to take a look at it. I'm going to read to you from the beginning of this story because I want to talk about it for a second, if you don't mind. It says, streaks of uncertainty carve through the stately halls of Carriage Services, a distinguished company in the funeral sector. The recent earnings report for the fourth quarter of 2024 reveals a distinctive dichotomy. While numbers impress in some sectors, they falter elsewhere. And it goes on. AI obituaries are very popular, and AI is very popular as a writing tool. I use AI. Lots of stuff that you read that I have written has been at very least spell checked by AI, and sometimes I organize my interviews using AI so that I don't have to jump back and forth to find all of the information. It's a tool for lots of people to use, but if you're not comfortable writing, cutting and pasting what AI tells you to do is just not a great idea. When people use them for obituaries, and I can tell when someone has just taken what AI told it to write and put it in an obituary, it reeks of it. It reeks of it the way that last sentence or two that I read reeks of. I'm trying very hard to sound like I'm a fancy person writing, but my fanciness doesn't match, like the words don't match the tone. I mean, this isn't an English course, but I just wanted to let you guys know that I do use AI, and I use it for some of my reporting, and it's not a tool that's not worth using. But if you are going to use AI, you should also have someone who understands how stories go help you, because otherwise you get this. And the other thing that I liked about that is it didn't understand when, as I mentioned in the last report, it didn't understand when Carlos Quesada said that, well, we're not including the revenue that we expect to get from acquisitions this year, and we haven't made any acquisitions in the last 2 years. AI didn't get that, but it did get that the streaks of uncertainty were carving their way through the stately halls of Carriage Services. Just it's brutal to read. I read these brutal things just for you, so I don't know if you appreciate it, but I do it because I appreciate you, and normally don't want to subject you to those kind of things. But there's a link to that story in the show notes if you want to read it. It doesn't get any better than what I've already read, but you can check for yourself. I want to do a quick shout out to H.E. Turner and Company, funeral directors from Genesee County, New York, from Batavia, New York in Genesee County, where they have been named the Business of the Year Award recipient. I think what is cool about this is I reported on them either late in 23 or early in 24. There was a local funeral home to them that was kind of in trouble that they purchased and added to their funeral home group. And when I reported on it at the time, they were able to add it without adding too much more staff, but without having to fire any staff. And they really saw it as a way to kind of keep the local funeral home vibe, I guess, that they had developed in the Batavia area, more local, I guess. They just seemed to be very excited to be able to prolong the life of this former competitor, and I guess it paid off, because they are the Business of the Year and rightfully proud to be that way. I'll link to their announcement in the show notes, but also a link to the In Case You Missed It story that I ran back in I think it was early 2024, maybe just about a year ago today. But link in the show notes. Just really quickly, Matthews sent out an announcement this week saying that it had gotten past the waiting period for the proposed sale of SGK Brand Solutions. It's the Hart-Scott-Rodino Antitrust Improvements Act of 1976. I guess, imposes a waiting period, kind of like a gun, but for corporate mergers. And that waiting period has over, which has kind of cleared the way, and they continue to expect that the sale will go through sooner rather than later, but certainly in 2025. They are also going to be at the Sidoni Small Cap Conference at the end of March for you investor types who are interested in following along in that. I spoke with someone kind of in the know, and we were supposing that they really just want to kind of realign and make a statement about how they see the company going forward now in light of their recent proxy win, and also the win over Tesla, and their addition of a new board member who is familiar with the electric vehicle market, or more familiar with the electric vehicle market. So I think we're going to see a reorientation of Matthews. I'm really looking forward to their, contrary to what I said at the beginning of this, I am looking forward to their conference call, to their next quarterly conference call, to see how they see things shaking out for the rest of the year. So link to that in the show notes. Last but not least, not necessarily a bad story, but something that it irritates me that I have to report on it. It irritates me that you have to listen to it, and I am sorry in advance. So Colorado is introducing a bill that is affirming transgender rights, making it against the law to not use the person's stated gender on their death certificate. I've covered this a couple of times since I've started here, and it quite frankly baffles me. I mentioned in the post, I spoke not too long ago with someone who was, an anti-trans funeral director. And I chose not to run the interview because I couldn't get it through my thick skull. I've gone to so many of these events, and everyone is seems so committed to helping families. And I like to think that maybe bigots aren't welcome at funeral service conventions. I think that's a nice thing to pretend, and it's okay with me to pretend that it's true because it helps me. But once I found out that there really are people who would turn away grieving families, it really took a lot of the wind out of my sails. And speaking with trans people who work in the funeral industry and who are uncomfortable or who know that they can't be themselves all the time, or they have to be very specific about the ways in which they're themselves. It doesn't fit with my maybe overblown sense of the kind of work that funeral directors do. But I don't think that I have an overblown sense. I think that there are some small-minded bigots out there who, as always, are going to be the loudest, because the loudest are always the meanest. And I feel like that's really what this is about. It's depressing that there has to be a law. It's depressing that there are people on this planet who are afraid to go to a funeral home because they're afraid how they're going to be treated by really the most caring as a class profession on the planet, or what ought to be the most caring as. Like I get the clergy. I'm not, clergy, that's their job. Their job is to be nice to some people and mean to other people. But the funeral directors are really supposed to be, in my mind, just welcoming to everyone on their grief journey. And the fact that people feel like they increasingly need protection against being treated poorly by funeral directors, it's just not right. You guys deserve better because you, as a class, are better. But I have a link to the story in the show notes. I mean, hopefully the law passes. Hopefully no one's ever prosecuted under it. I think it's a shame that they have to make this law. It's a shame that it's even a conversation that has to be had because, I like to think that this ought to be the least bigoted profession on the planet. I mean, it is, right? I think it is. But anyway, link in the show notes. And as any good marketer knows, there's nothing like following up a controversial story with a commercial. So here's my commercial. We will have our funeral service business plan conference one day only. It is April 1st. It is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it's gonna be a blast. I've already started doing some interviews with people who will be presenting there, and we'll be running them in our bonus episodes for most of March, so you can get a little taste of who will be speaking and kind of what they're talking about if you're on the fence. But if you're not on the fence, I have two passes left, 2 free passes left. If you would like one of them, please reach out to me. My email is arusso@kbpublications.com. And of course, if you're driving along now, just click on the show notes and you will go to where my story is. And at the bottom of every story I write is my email address in case you feel like you need to get in touch with me. But if you'd like to come and the price point is keeping you back, shoot me an email. I have a couple of complimentary passes left that I would be happy to share with listeners. Otherwise, I will see you there, or I hope to see you there, and I will be reporting from there on April 1st. In case you missed it, is a Kates-Boylston production. It was written and edited by me, Tony Russo. If you would like to follow this show, we would love it if you did. If you're watching on your computer, just grab out your phone, or if you're listening on your computer, same thing. Just grab out your phone and look for your podcast app. If you have an iPhone, it is Apple Podcasts. It is a purple circle. Just click on the purple circle, type Funeral Service Insider, and you'll be able to subscribe to this and all of the other podcasts we do. It's all on the same feed. If you have an Android type device, you can get podcasts on your music player. So just open up Spotify, open up Amazon Music, wherever you get music. You can also get podcasts now. Again, just type in Funeral Service Insider and hit subscribe, and you will get updates as they come out. Subscribe is for free on podcasts, or at least on this podcast. And finally, if you have YouTube, same thing. You can go find go to Kates-Boylston's YouTube page, but you can follow. We have 2 different playlists. We have one playlist that is just for these live-ish videos, where it's my big dumb head talking the whole time, or else the other one is the static photo of our guest and whatever the guest is talking about. Either way, subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on a podcatcher, but I would love it if you gave me a call or send me an email. If you want to call me, you can reach me at 732-746-0233, extension 709. That is 732-746-0233, extension 709. I would be happy to play back your voicemails, unless you don't want me to, in which case, and people have said, I don't want you to play this, but I want you to know this, and that's fine with me. I take all sorts of feedback, but if you would like it played, just let me know, and I'd be happy to play it on the show as long as it is appropriate. That is all we have for this week, and we will check in with you next week